Hello, welcome to the training webinar for this week. Before we begin, I would like to point out the care with which I match the background that I show every week with the wardrobe that I happen to be wearing on that day. I mention that because today I happen to be wearing a wool ski sweater from Germany, which also has a liner built inside, and it's super warm. And so I'm going to have to ask for your forgiveness ahead of time in case I have to rip this thing off halfway through the webinar because I'm overheating. So it sure looks nice on the screen, and I'm very happy with the color coordination job I've done, but I may be less happy with my wardrobe choice. Today, we're going to discuss custom tasks. A couple of weeks ago, I went through an overview of all of the custom tasks that are included in the product. We didn't really get into any detail other than to kind of run through them quickly and talk about what each of them does. Today, at least for the first part of this webinar, I want to get more into sort of a technical discussion about custom tasks and their use. I have some custom tasks teed up for later on where we can take a look at some of the individual more common custom tasks that you might use, and we'll get into some detail on their usage. But I want to start off by talking about the custom tasks, I guess as a concept rather than any specifics about any individual custom task. So let's talk about their organization. And I seem to have my screen kind of slightly off size, but there we go. That should fix that. All of the custom tasks, let's start off with the organization. They're all included by default in a folder in the root level of your partition called custom tasks, but with square brackets around the name. This is where custom tasks should go on all of your installations. Now, in my particular case here, for this particular installation, I only have one partition. Actually, I think there are more, but I only give myself access to one partition. Let me log out and log back in as BPL support here, because I think that will give me access to multiple partitions. There we go. And if you have multiple partitions on your system, it doesn't matter which partition you're in, you need to have that custom tasks folder located at the root level of the partition. So as you can see, for each of these partitions, they've each got the custom task folder. Now, the contents of all these custom task folders are exactly the same. Well, I can't guarantee on this system they're all exactly the same because I don't use these other two partitions intentionally because I've got my system set up so that it only has a single partition, which matches the configuration that most of you will have on your systems. Partitions are useful, but they do segregate your system off into basically separate areas that can't talk to each other. And because they can't talk to each other and we can't share information between partitions, there are two implications of this. One is a general implication, which is that you only really need separate partitions if you are intentionally trying to set up a system that has two different portions that can't communicate with each other. So there needs to be a valid business reason for setting up a partition. And secondly, more specific to custom tasks themselves, because the partitions can't talk to each other, each partition needs to have its own custom tasks folder in that partition, because none of the objects that are included inside a partition can look at information that is contained in a different partition. So if you want to use any custom tasks in a partition, that partition needs to have its own custom tasks folder installed so that we can use them the way that they're supposed to be used inside that partition. Technically, the custom task, and that's not the custom task folder, but that is, technically, the custom task folder does not specifically need to be installed at the root level of the partition. Realistically, you could install it anywhere, but that's an extraordinarily bad idea. The reason why we have these folders with all of the square brackets in their name, and the reason why they're all set up so that they're at the root level of the partition, is because if I have a production server and a development server, I'm going to be exporting, or ideally, I'm going to be exporting all of my applications from the development server back over to my production server. Every object in Process Director has a unique ID number for that object, and that is a GUID that is assigned by the database that stores all of the Process Director data. Some of the objects, you can actually see what that GUID is. If we were just to open up sort of any generic form, for example, or I guess a timeline, it doesn't really matter. If we go into the options section, you're always going to see a GUID like this. In this case, it says PRID, which is the project instance, or I'm sorry, the project ID. So that is the ID used in Process Director as the unique ID for this specific process timeline definition. Every object has a PRID like that. Sometimes you have to kind of derive them, like on the form. Well, no, we have form ID in there as well, so you can see it there, but it's also up here as form ID and part of the URL. So this, it's hard to highlight URLs, but there we go. It's the same ID right there in the URL for the form. When you click on this URL, it will basically open a form instance based on this form definition. Now, GUIDs are great, except that they don't import between systems. I can't have this same GUID on two different systems. That makes the import process a little tricky. So what we have to do on the import process when we're bringing in objects from a different system is Process Director, if there's any links to any other object in the system, like generally for a form, we have this link here to tell us what process is going to be started when the form is submitted. Well, on your dev system, this is a link via a GUID, but whenever I import it, I have a little problem. Since I can't import GUIDs, I have to be able to find this CT examples timeline. Now, the way that I do that is as part of the import, I store the name. I say we store the name, and we store the folder location where this particular timeline is. So whenever you do the import, what we're doing is we're looking for the file name, CT examples timeline. So object name, I guess, would be a better way of putting that. And then we have to look for the folder location where our import tells us it was stored, which is the folder location it was stored on the development server. So it happens to be in this CT examples folder. So on the import, in order to link this form to this timeline, I've got to look at the CT examples folder and look inside it to see if there is an object called CT examples timeline. If there is, it's a match. Great. Now I query this CT examples timeline to find out what its GUID is on this new system, because when it gets created on import, it gets assigned its own unique GUID. And GUIDs are not just unique on a specific system, they're unique theoretically worldwide, which is why you can't have the same GUID on two different systems. So when this timeline is imported, it will receive its unique GUID that supplies its unique value on this system. And as part of the import, once I can match the name and the folder location, I can link up this form with the CT examples timeline via its new GUID. The same is true with custom tasks. So if on the custom task event mapping tab of your form, or if in your timeline you have a custom task process timeline activity, and I think on this one I do, I have this set request number, which we've talked about many, many times, which is a custom task activity and pulls the set form data custom task. Okay, great. Where is this set form data custom task? We have to do the same thing for this link that we did with the timeline a second ago. I'm going to look for something called set form data, and I'm going to try to find it in the same folder location where it existed on my dev server, which ideally would be the custom task folder right here. And if it's there, actually, it's not even in custom tasks. It's in custom tasks and then form data mapping, I believe. So it's going to look through to go to the root level of my partition, look for the custom task folder, look for form data mapping, and then inside the form data mapping folder is going to look for set form data. If it finds the set form data custom task, it will recreate the link using the GUID for the set form data custom task that exists on this system, and then that link will be created on import. Technically, as long as the location of the custom task folder is exactly the same and has exactly the same name on both your dev server and your production server, it doesn't technically need to follow this naming convention. You can have a folder buried somewhere in your content list on the dev server that's named CTs and contains all of these CT folders, each of which you could also name uniquely. And as long as those locations and names were exactly the same on both the dev and the production server, everything would import without a problem. Now, it's an extraordinarily bad idea to do this, especially if you submit a technical support ticket and say this custom task isn't working, because I guarantee you either I or whatever tech support tech handles your support ticket will say, okay, especially if we have access to your system, we'll say, where in the world are your custom tasks? So it's really good if you follow our suggestions for custom tasks. Oh, and by the way, when you import the custom task, wherever you import it, it is going to have the name with the square brackets around the text of the name. That's just built into the import. So obviously the best practice, throw this into the root of each of the partitions where you're going to use custom tasks, which is essentially going to be all of them, and just do the import into the root of your partition and everything will work fine. It'll be the same on all systems. It's easy to remember, and all of your imports will work properly. The custom tasks themselves, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, are split up into different functional areas that describe what that task does. So obviously, Active Directory custom tasks are all custom tasks that enable you to perform various Active Directory functions, largely fill fields or doing rule queries from Active Directory. Case management, content actions that you do with some different objects in that exist in the content list to either import them or export them to various locations. Some custom tasks are specific to certain licensed components. So if we go, now I've got to try to find, here we go. Here's Inform. This is the one I was thinking about. There's a custom task called Mobile Form Import. And there are a couple of these that are sort of scattered around. And they really only work for certain additionally licensed components. So the Mobile Form Import custom task is specifically used to import forms from the BP Logix mobile application, which is a separately licensed component to Process Director and one that most of you won't have. And so therefore this custom task is just never going to be of any use to you because you don't have that license component. You never need to do that import from the mobile application. So there are other custom tasks that are not separately licensed, but they're still kind of special. And that is the web services custom task. Now, if you're going to use these web services custom tasks on some external system outside of Process Director, then that's fine. There's no restriction on these particular custom tasks. However, if you want to use some of the web services from Process Director itself, that's going to be a little problematic unless you have enabled the web services in your installation settings. So if we go into installation settings, and we go to the properties page of installation settings, down, well, it used to be at the bottom. It's kind of changed now as to how it works because we have all this, we have all these new things. But if you have anything below 6.1.300 beta, it's going to look like this for you. And down here at the bottom, it's going to say web service enabled, true or false, require web service authentication, and web service restrictions. So these three properties are really important. If you want to use any of the web service custom tasks with Process Director, which is to say to use Process Director to go in, find some data, fill some fields, or what have you, you can't do that until you enable web services. Web services are disabled by default. And you should not enable them in Process Director without doing some serious thinking, because all of the web services that you can access in Process Director, so there are a number of built-in web services. You can look at the developer's guide. There's a whole section on the web services that we have in the product. They basically give you full administrative control over Process Director. So when you turn them on, you're implicitly giving anyone who accesses that web service full control over Process Director, not just from the custom tasks, but just by typing in the URL or sending a SOAP request from anywhere that can access those web service URLs. That's an extraordinarily bad idea. So if you are going to turn them on, the very first thing you need to do is enable web service restrictions. What we generally recommend is that if you're going to turn web services on, you specify the IP addresses, which are the only IP addresses that are allowed to access any web services on that server. So in my case, I have this set up to one of our internal IP addresses that comes out of our not exactly sure where it comes from. I don't know if this is a VPN IP address or whether this is one that's assigned by our internal Azure. Don't entirely remember where it came from that I set it up, but I know that this is the IP address that the engineer said is the only IP address that will be allowed to access any web services on this particular server. Usually, in the case of a customer, you would choose the IP address of some sort of application server. And it would be that application server that actually called the web services and ran them so that only that server could call those web services. You can throw in multiple IP addresses here by making this a comma separated list as well. So you can have just more than one as I have here to set up these web services. But if web services aren't enabled, you can't use the web service Web Services CT to access anything in Process Director, although they'll work just fine for any other web service that just happens to exist out there randomly on the web. Again, there's a web service custom task that is going to be useless to all of you probably, which is the Prism HR user query. If you did not purchase the vaccine tracking app from BP Logix back in 2020, and I'm not even sure really well, that's not true. I know of at least one customer that still uses it, but for the most part, nobody uses it anymore. It was an important application for about a year and a half. And part of it was to do a user query out of Prism's HR web services. But if you don't have the VaxApp custom task, this custom task simply doesn't work. Similarly, Azure SMS. If you're not on Azure, or if your Azure installation does not have SMS messaging enabled, then this Azure SMS custom task is useless to you. So there's no reason to even use it. So there are some custom tasks which are either part of a separately licensed component like the mobile application, or that are very, very highly use case specific. And outside of those use cases, they don't really work for 99% plus of customers. I suspect that the vast majority of you will never, ever be able to use the Prism HR user query in any context whatsoever. However, it's still in the product. And one of the things that you have to remember about the custom tasks is that many of them are still in the product for legacy purposes. We can't really remove them because if we do, many people's existing applications will no longer work. But many custom tasks have been, as a practical matter, deprecated. For example, if we go into form data mapping, there is fill fields from business value. Well, actually, it looks like I may have removed a lot of those custom tasks. That's not, actually, it's database connectors. That's the one I wanted to look at. Most of these custom tasks, you never need to use anymore. At one point in time, prior to the existence of business values, and prior to implementing the fill dropdowns and set form data tabs on form definitions themselves, anytime you wanted to go out to a database to grab some information to either fill some fields on a form or fill a dropdown on a form or what have you, you had to create a custom task to do that, or you had to configure one of these custom tasks to do that. And so there's advanced fill dropdown, there's advanced fill fields, there is fill dropdown and fill dropdown object from business value and fill dropdown object from database and fill fields from database, rule query from DB. You don't really need any of these custom tasks anymore. I might be able to think of some really rare use cases where you would need to use them, but for the most part, all of these custom tasks have largely been deprecated. We don't have to do anything from DB anymore because we have business values. That handles our both access to and returns data from our databases. The form definition has a set form data tab and a filled dropdowns tab that, in terms of configuring the form, enable us to use a business value to fill a dropdown or to fill fields on a form. Now, the nice thing about business values is that they provide a universal connection that anybody can use. It virtualizes the data in the database. So any implementer can use that business value to pull back that data and use it to fill dropdowns or fill stuff on a form. And you only have to work on it in one place. You only have to configure it in one place. You don't have to have multiple copies of it. Prior to the existence of business values, and of course, before the set form data and field drop downs features were included as part of the form definition, these were the custom tasks that you had to use to pull this data. And so every time on a form you wanted to fill a drop down from a database, you would have to run the fill drop down or fill drop down from database, which right there we go, fill drop down from DB. That's the custom task you would have to use. And the drawback to these custom tasks is while they worked just fine, is that you had to constantly recreate the same custom task on multiple forms to fill a very similar dropdown that you were going to use on multiple forms. So if you had a dropdown where all of your office locations were listed in a database or all of your departments or whatever, and you wanted to use the department dropdown and you wanted to retrieve your departments, now then every form where you had a department's drop down, you would have to configure this custom task and you'd have to rewrite the same SQL statement. And that is super tedious. You don't have to do that anymore. So most of these database connectors custom tasks are just not all that useful anymore. Now, there is one that is super useful, and that is SQL command. As we've discussed when we talked about SQL, you do not want to put an update, insert, or delete SQL command in anything other than the SQL command custom task. And if you want to do multiple inserts, updates, or deletes, you're going to have to configure this custom task multiple times. That is by design. Because one thing that you do not want to do with a business value that any implementer in your organization can use is to give everybody in your organization the ability anytime they want to run an insert, update, or delete command. That's a super bad idea. So we have it set up so that, well, that's misleading. We really recommend that you only use the SQL command. Having said that, we do not, on the process director side, make any changes at all or do any vetting at all other than to ensure, depending on your system settings, that you're using the SQL encoding character for any parameters that you pass via SQL statement. But other than that, we don't vet your SQL. So technically you could put an insert, update, or delete command inside a business value, and we're gonna let you do it. But this is me telling you, do not do that ever, ever, ever. So just keep in mind that while we do not mess with your SQL, there are some things into which you do not want to put, you don't want to put SQL in to do insert, update, or delete commands. And that is definitely something you don't want to do for any of your business values. All right. So because of the existence of these different CTs that are kind of deprecated, our recommendation is that you don't use them if there is a UI method to use instead of this. So if you want to fill a dropdown or you want to fill a set of fields on a form, we give you that inside the form itself. There is a set form data feature that is built right into the form so that you can just select an event, add an action, and then you can pick the form field where you want to set the value of the data on the form. In most cases, when you're doing this, you're doing it from a business value. So you just pick a business value and set that value inside the form. Similarly, and let me get rid of this. Well, I'll just not save this form. Similarly, for field dropdowns, we have the same thing. I don't actually think I have a drop down on this form, so I'm not going to be able to show you any sample configuration for one. But If you have a drop down that needs to be filled, like I said, I don't have one, you can actually point to a business value that will just return a data set, and you can set that here. So in most cases, if there is a UI feature that enables you to accomplish something that you used to do with a custom task, we strongly recommend that you use that UI feature and that you don't use the custom task, because the existence of the feature just largely deprecates the use of that custom task. Now, they still have to stay inside the setup of custom tasks, so they're still part of the custom tasks import that you would do. However, they'll still work for any of your legacy applications. So if you've been a Process Director customer for a while and you have several forms, that already use these, no, don't worry about it. They still work. You can still use them. We're going to keep these in the product for backward compatibility so that all of your old pre-existing uses of these custom tasks still work. So you don't have to worry about them not working for you. The other question to ask is, well, where do I use? Well, actually, that's not the other question. There was something else that I wanted to talk about, and I have it in my notes here, and it looks like I just skipped past it. And that is CT version numbers. If you open a custom tasks configuration screen, and I'm just going to do the preview here to open up this particular custom task. Custom tasks, for the most part, don't have anything to do with the version of Process Director you're running. I have to say for the most part, because that's not universally true. Sometimes we make some changes to Process Director that affect the back end to such an extent that the existing custom tasks also have to be updated, or they would not be compatible with that version of Process Director. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. I think over the last 5 years, with all the versions that we've issued since, well, actually probably longer than 5 years, probably 6 or 7 years, I can think of 3 times that one or more custom tasks needed to be updated because of a fundamental change we made to the back end. The most important one was way back in 2017 when we did something that was so fundamental that we actually have 2 different sets of custom tasks. One, I believe, is prior to 4.3 something, and the other one is after 4.3 or something. It's on the downloads page of the support site. You can see that. And here and there, a couple of other times, we've had to make some changes to custom tasks. But like I said, for the most part, that's the version of Process Director you're on is not relevant to the custom tasks themselves. Now, one of the big changes that we did make to a couple of custom tasks did occur as part of the version 5 to version 6/6.1 changeover. So if you're going to upgrade to 6.1.x, you really do need to update your custom task for that one. But for the most part, you don't. Custom tasks are developed on a different schedule from the product. Custom tasks are all developed individually, and each individual custom task has its own version number. So down at the very bottom of the custom task, on all of the configuration screen, it tells you custom task version. Now, the version number that we use is basically just a date that custom task was published. So whenever the developer finished working on it and said, this was a good custom task, that's how it's versioned. So if you look at this custom task, you can see that this is the June 18th, 2024 version of the SQL command custom task. Every custom task has its own unique version. So there is no sort of generic version of the custom tasks. There's 100 and some custom tasks, and all of them are versioned independently. They're all versioned separately from the product. We do, and because we do make changes, and sometimes we find a little bug here and there in one of the custom tasks and they have to be updated, you do need to go to the support site and check on a recurring basis to ensure that you have the most recent custom tasks. So you just need to download them and import them. We do make that much simpler for you because even though there's a whole bunch of custom tasks, all of which are versioned independently and they all have their own custom task versions, we only release them as a big group of custom tasks. So all you need to do is just go to the support site. And once you have logged into the support site, go to downloads, and there's a Process Director downloads page. You'll open that up and here's the product. And right below that are the custom tasks. And by the way, that version where there was a big break in the custom tasks was version 4.41. So we refer to those custom tasks, which are all the same custom task. They just don't work with version higher than 4.41. So we have a version of the legacy custom tasks for anyone who is still on that lower version. And if you're on that lower version, you're doing it wrong. But there's just a single link to download the most recent version of the custom tasks. They all get downloaded in the custom task folder. So even if we only change one of them, you still need to come and download the custom task. Now, with all of our downloads, you can see what the release date is. So these custom tasks have a release date of 5 September 2024. That is going to change whenever we release 6.1.300 because we are finding a couple of little tweaks that need to be made and a couple of different custom tasks, most of which you shouldn't be using, like the jump to step custom task for workflows. You really shouldn't be using workflows. We strongly recommend that you don't. However, if you have been a customer for a long, long time and you still have some workflows and you're using jump to step on 6.1, there's a tweak we had to make to jump to step because we changed the way we did something in the back end. And so now the jump to step custom task doesn't. But again, that's a workflow based thing and you really shouldn't be using workflows because we formally deprecated them at version 4.5 and we stopped putting any new features or any updates onto the workflow. So as a practical matter, workflow is dead as fried chicken. Again, it's in the product because backwards compatibility. We have some customers that have been with BP Logix longer than I have. And they have a lot of workflows that they used back in 2013, 2014 or 15 or what have you. So we can't take the workflows out. You shouldn't be using them. But one of the custom tasks that we're having to replace is jump to step CT, and we've made a fix to that. So when 6.1.300 comes out, we'll have that jump to step CT in it. And in fact, we might just put the custom tasks out prior to that. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I can think of something that was going on with the item actions a couple of weeks ago, which I think may be fixed now. It's kind of an edge case, but a customer ran into it. So we might just, in fact, I might just sometime later today, ask the engineering guys to gen up a new version of the custom tasks and stick them online so that I can update that page so we can download the newest version of the custom tasks. They may not want to do that because there are some custom tasks that are going to be 6.1 specific, but they should be backwards compatible. We'll look into that. The important thing to remember is that the custom tasks and product releases are not the same thing and often do not happen at the same time. So just keep an eye on those custom tasks on the downloads page, and routinely check to see if you need an update on your custom tasks. Most custom tasks can be run from either a form or a process timeline. On a form, there is the custom task event mapping tab on the form definition. Inside a process timeline, there is, let me close this up real quick so that this is a little more obvious. There is the custom task type of activity. So the question then becomes, okay, do I use a custom task in a form or in a process timeline? Now, there are a couple of custom tasks that are so form specific, they simply can't be used in a process timeline. And so they are form only custom tasks. I think it's also true that there are a couple of custom tasks that are only available for a process timeline. For the most part, however, any custom task can be run on either a form or a process timeline, other than those tiny exceptions that I just mentioned. For example, validate form and validate form field. You can't validate the form from a process timeline. Validation implies that a user is looking at the form. So that is specifically a form custom task. That's an exception, however, because most of the custom tasks can be run either via a custom task activity or via a form. And happily at BP Logix, whenever you decide, well, you want to select a custom task, well, that's fine. Let's go back to the form, actually, since I've already got one selected here and I don't want to mess that up. Leave. And we'll go back to the custom task event mapping. And so when I click add custom task, oh no, when I first select my custom task, I've got to select it before I can add it to the form. We're going to show you the contents of the custom tasks folder, and we are only going to show you the custom tasks that work in the context of a form. So for example, there are 3 Active Directory custom tasks. Only one of them can be used in a form, and that is the fill fields from Active Directory. The other 2 are basically timeline only custom tasks. They have to be called from a timeline activity. They can't be called from a form. Although fill fields from Active Directory can, in fact, be used in both a form and a process timeline. So basically, we bifurcate out only those custom tasks that you can implement on the particular object that you're trying to use to implement them. So how do I make the decision of determining when I use a custom task? Well, there's no hard and fast rule I can give you. I can only give you some general guidelines. First off, is the custom task you're going to run related to the process in any way? So let's go back to the validate form custom task. Sure, all it does is validate the form and checks to see whether the data that is in your form fields matches any of the default validation rules that you've set up, required fields, or any of the custom validation rules you've set up. And that's really all it does. That is completely unrelated to the process. Now, that particular custom task, I understand, only works in a form, so you could only run it there. But that's the example of a type of custom task that just has no impact at all on how the process is supposed to run. In fact, in that particular case, it's imposed ideally before the process even starts, because it's going to prevent you from submitting the form if your data doesn't validate the way it's supposed to. So if it is unrelated to the process itself, you can run it off of the form. So for example, if I want to run a process asynchronously, so I want to call another process, it's a different process. I don't really care if it runs in conjunction with whatever process is either running while I'm looking at the form or will run when I submit the form, then I can call it. I think probably one of the most common uses of this would be a conversion to PDF, where I want to run an asynchronous process, but I don't want my user to actually see it happen. It's not really part of the process itself. So I can just, create a PDF conversion, perhaps because I've uploaded a form instance, or not a form instance, a document attachment. Say I upload a Word document attachment and I just want to automatically convert that to a PDF. I don't want it to get in the way of what my user is doing. So I don't want to run the convert to PDF directly from my form. So what I might do in that case is I would just call a process custom task. I'd just click on run process, and I could have a process that only really has one step to it. So a little timeline that has one timeline activity that calls the convert to PDF custom task. By running it from the run via the run process custom task, what happens on the form as a practical matter is I do something like click a button and it kicks off this launch process custom task, and everything else that happens all happens in the background. I don't want my user to see it. It's not really part of my process, but it is something that I want to happen. My child process will kick off and it'll run in the background. And the only thing it will do in this particular case is we'll run the convert to PDF custom task. Maybe it converts, my document that I've just uploaded as a Word document. It just takes it and converts it to PDF and then just reattaches it back to the form or process. And I'm off to the races, and I don't have to wait around for that conversion process to occur. Convert to PDF is often problematic because depending on how big your document is and how many images it might contain and other things like that impact the amount of time that it takes to do the conversion, it might require that your user sits there and watch a spinny run for, 10, 15, 30 seconds while some massive Word document with many images gets converted to PDF. You don't want your user to have to sit there and wait for that. So this is a great example of where you just want to do that conversion in the background. And you would do that simply by calling a run process custom task and just have a little process timeline that has a single step. It does the convert to PDF, so that whenever I click off that convert to PDF, from a user point of view, nothing happens immediately. I don't get a spinny. I can continue to work on my form. I can continue to submit it. But in the fullness of time, that PDF conversion will complete. The PDF will be reattached to the form. And as soon as that conversion is complete, I can see it presumably in a show attached objects control on my form. And then I can download it and do whatever I need to do. So if I want to run something asynchronously, that might be a candidate for running from the form. If it modifies a form behavior or form dependency, then obviously I'm probably going to want to run that from a form. In previous times, the fill dropdowns or fill fields would almost have always been run from a form, certainly fill dropdowns, because I'm modifying the form's behavior directly by doing the fill dropdowns. Now, of course, in today's world, we don't have to do that. We already have set form data and fill dropdowns built into the form, so we don't have to use those CTs. But there are a couple of other CTs that do form things. In fact, they're all either in form data mapping or in form, like running JavaScript, or some of the alert boxes that, depending on how much time we have after we talk about the technical aspects of using CTs, we'll take a look at. I've got those teed up to take a look at later. Obviously, the validation stuff. There's some things like show map on form or get geolocation that really do need to run from the form. I'm in both cases, I'm actually showing some data on the form that's based on either the user's location or some input. So obviously those are modifying the form. So those would have to be run from the form. We want to use them, custom tasks that is, in the process itself in most other cases. For example, the example that we've seen hundreds of times by this time, my set request number. This is just a set form data custom task. Technically, I could use it in a form. The reason that I don't want to use it in a form is because I don't want to burn a sequence number until I actually have a running process timeline. So if I set it up so that there is only a running process timeline when this custom task gets called, I know that my sequence number is not going to skip some sequences, because if I put this on the form, every time somebody opens a form, it's not possible with the form's lifecycle to use a sequence number anywhere on a form that will not ultimately generate a sequence number, even if you don't submit the form. So I can't put this on the form. Really does need to go into the process itself. Another good reason for putting things inside the process itself is if I don't want the user to see it happening. And so therefore I want to sort of hide it inside the process itself. Be advised, you can't do that universally. For example, let's say this very first activity here was not set request number. Let's say that this very first activity was convert to PDF. I'm not going to be able to hide the PDF conversion from the user. What's going to happen is the user is going to click the submit button on the form. It's going to kick off this timeline, and it's going to say, oh, the first thing I have to do is convert this PDF. I don't know what happens after the PDF conversion, but that's okay. I don't have to. We're going to do the PDF conversion now. And then whatever's supposed to happen after the PDF conversion, we'll get to that when the conversion is done. Okay, what that means is that from an end user perspective, they're going to click the submit button and they're just going to see the spinny, and the spinny is going to spin and spin and spin, because we are not going to close that form until that conversion is done. We kicked off the conversion on submission, and so our form is not going to go away. The way that I would, of course, hide that and get past that I would not run the convert to PDF directly. Again, I would do the run process custom task. And with that run process custom task, I could then call my PDF conversion and have the PDF conversion happen offline, which would, instantly end the very first activity and move us to kick off the parent approval loop, and then go directly into the user activity for approval one that is assigned to whatever user it's assigned to. Also, I would use the process timeline if what is going on in the custom task is just completely unrelated to the form's behavior or its data. I would just run the custom task from the timeline. That can be a little tricky determining whether that is true or not. For example, let's say I'm going to run copy form data. In most cases, I would say that you would run copy form data in the process timeline. That is a custom task that takes the data from an existing form instance, creates a new form instance, and transfers or copies data from the initial form instance to the new form instance. And by the way, it has happened. I am dying in this sweater, which is far too warm for the temperature in the house. So I am going to have to pull this thing off. I apologize, but I'm starting to suffer actual torture wearing that thing. See, my shirt is now all wet. I feel a lot better now. So copy form data, usually you do it in a timeline, but you may want to call that from a form in certain instances if you want the user to see that. Another one is metadata, applying metadata. Most of the time, I would argue that you would run the set metadata in the process timeline itself, but that's not universally true because sometimes, even though it doesn't affect anything on the form itself in terms of the data on the form, it does change some back-end data, the metadata, obviously about the form. So should I run that in the form or the process timeline? For example, in my metadata webinar, so let me leave here, go into my archive folder, and let's scroll down to metadata. So in my metadata form itself, I have this document library form, and on the document library form itself, I have a couple of different fields, some of which, like the effective date and the keywords, are associated directly to an attribute. And I also have a category picker that is associated, well, it's not associated, and that's the problem, with a metadata category. So I need to ensure that my metadata is set. And I want to do it while we're filling out the form because honestly, setting metadata doesn't take a lot of time. And so my user won't see what's happening. Well, what I'm probably going to want to do in that case is what I've done on this form, and you can go back and review the training webinar on metadata. I have this category field, which is called cats, and it's an event field. So anytime I change that category, irrespective, because I might not fill out an effective date, I might not fill out keywords. So therefore, there's no data to set for those fields, but I do need to set a category. And so when I set that category, I'm going to want to run set metadata so that I can apply the values of the category and the appropriate attributes. In this case, it's even a little more complex than that because I have the similar attributes in a couple of different categories. And so I don't actually know what attribute in my metadata that I want to set unless I know what category for which I'm setting the metadata. So in this particular case, I need to run the set metadata custom task because I need to add a category to the custom or to the form instance. And once I add that form instance, I need to pull the effective date and the keywords. But this is one of those edge cases. I don't necessarily have to run it here in the form. I could run it in the process timeline itself. And so this is one of those custom tasks where it really is largely up to you where you put them. Because in both cases, I'm setting metadata, not really setting any data on the form, and it doesn't really affect the form's operation, doesn't really affect the operation of the process timeline at all. In fact, the metadata is going to be a post-application knowledge view filter that I'm going to use to pull forms and documents later on. It doesn't have any effect on the application itself at all. So where do I run it? Well, I've chosen to run it in the form off of an event field. I could just as easily have chosen to run it in the process timeline itself so that at whatever the appropriate point I reached in the process timeline, it just ran the set metadata and it ran it. So it's sort of tricky to figure out for some of these where you want to run them. And so for a custom task like set metadata, I think that decision is largely up to you. The important question to ask is, do I want the user to see this happen or not? If you want the user to see it happen, then you probably want to call the custom task from the form. If you don't want the user to see it happen, or you don't care whether the user sees it happen, you can just run it from the process timeline. I would suggest the default decision should be to run custom tasks from the process timeline rather than the form, although the number of exemptions to that are large enough that that's not a super accurate guidelines. So all I can tell you is to think about these various things in determining whether you're going to run the custom task from the form or from the process itself. Great. So it is exactly 11 o'clock, and that is the first half of my presentation on general principles. So let's talk about the custom tasks themselves and pretty much the most common ones you're going to use. If you've followed my recommendation over the past several years, you already know about the set form data custom task and its specific use in setting a request number, a unique request number for every form that gets submitted. Not every form that gets created, every one that gets submitted. So I'm going to use this, personally, I'm going to use this in pretty much any application that I build. Indeed, it is built into my template. If we go look at my template library that we talked about a little while ago, I think a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about the template library. If we go into my template library, this application is a stub. And every time I create a new application, I create it from this application stub, and that set request number activity, which calls the set form data custom task, that happens in every process timeline. Now, for the most part, outside of, I think, a common but relatively limited use such as this, I think in most cases, if you need to set form data, and I have way too many folders open, so let's make my life a little easier so that I can access this. The best place to go is to the set form data tab of your form definition. This is where most of your set form data should be done. So while we do have the big example for setting sequence numbers and unique sequence numbers in the process itself, outside of that, the set form data, the need to do set form data is super common. And so the set form data custom task was probably the most widely used custom task that we've ever created. But with the existence of set form data now, the use cases for it have been minimized. It is a real simple custom task because all it does is allows you to select a form field and then specify the data you want to go to the form field. Now, there is another use case for the set form data custom task, generally in a process timeline and unrelated to the request number, which is when I am going through a process. There are certain times when, after reaching a certain point in the process, I'm going to want to check on some other object to check its status, or I'm going to need to go into some sort of external database and check the status of some object in an external database. I'm going to need to return some data, and I'm going to need to set that data as part of the process. So that's another common use for this, where I just, largely for external data, I just need to go out and grab something and check its status and then update my form with whatever the status for that thing may be. And that would be a use of the set form data that I would throw into a process timeline. I generally don't think I would do that in a form unless, again, you want the user to do some sort of manual check. And if you're going to have the user do a manual check in the form, then once again, we're back to the set form data tab of the process timeline. Similarly, other very common use of the custom task was the fill, one of the fill drop-downs custom tasks. Again, largely deprecated now by the existence of fill drop-downs in the form definition. But those were the most commonly used custom tasks, which is why they're part of the form now and why we don't have to do those custom tasks as much. One that is still vitally important to use is the set focus custom task. And you're going to use that one all the time. So we'll take this form and let's drop in a table here real quick. So we'll just give it, we'll give it one row and two columns. Let's not make this any harder than it has to be. And let's throw an array in here. So we'll go to arrays and we'll drop in an array start control, and then we'll drop in text box. We'll go into the second column, drop in another text box, and then drop an array end control. And just for general purposes, we will drop an add row to array control there. And I forgot what the array was named. I'm going to need that to customize my add row. It won't let me do that until I give it a value. And that's not the value I want because I don't know what value I want. It is that array start 14. Now we'll go back to my add row and we'll paste in array start 14. So now I have an array. Okay, great as far as it goes. I'm going to need something more than the array. I'm going to need some other controls here because we got to demonstrate this properly. So let me drop in an input control there, and let me drop in another input control there just for good measure. Let's update and run my form. So now my form is going to load up. Oh, I forgot to do something that's super important, but we're already running the form. So we'll go through it and we'll see that in this particular case, there's no problem yet. But we're gonna make a problem, a very, very common problem that we have to solve with, especially with event field. So we're going to add a row to our array, and we'll go into this field. I'll put in some data and I'll hit tab. Oh, great. Fine. I'll hit tab again. Okay. Happy camper. Let's hit tab again. Now it goes to that fourth field. Great. I'll hit tab again. Takes me to my add row. So if I want to add a row, I can certainly do that. And then I can sort of shift tab myself back and hit tab again. All right, happy. This is working great. Now let's break it. Let's go here. And actually, while this is most often in arrays, it's not always in arrays. I didn't really need to make the array control now that I'm thinking about it. It's just that in arrays is when you usually see it. But fine, we're going to go to this field here. We're going to go to field properties. We're going to make that one an event field, and we're going to make this one an event field too. Okay, that's great as far as that goes. Now we're going to run it. We're going to fill out our form again. So we'll have to give it a second to generate. I'll have a sip of coffee while it does. Now we've got a form. We can tab our way into our form field. And we can go to our second form field. Okay, now I've got a problem. I'm back up at the top of the form. I can make it worse because I can fill out this data here and fill out that data here. Now, for a second, you probably didn't catch it on Zoom. My cursor tried to jump to this field, but it's not there anymore. Where is it? Well, if I hit tab, all right, my cursor is way back up at the top. There we go. That's fine. That's fine. Now I can go here. I can fill that field out and I'll hit tab again. And once again, I'm at the very top of my page in tab order. So I have to tab through all of these fields again to get to this one to fill it out. Now what's happening here is that I have events that occur whenever I change the values of these form fields. When an event occurs, the form has to be redisplayed. So the form is going to reload. It's going to happen in your browser. It's going to be super fast, and your user's probably not going to see it. But what they are going to notice is that if they make a change, they're back up at the top of the form, and they're going to have to tab up from the top, which if you only have 4 fields on the form is not that big of a deal. But if your event field is 30 fields into the form when it kicks off and then throws you back up to the top, you're going to be hating life as an end user. So I've got to be able to fix that. So anytime that I have a form with an event field, I'm almost 100% going to have to throw in the set focus custom task on that form to eliminate this problem. And what the set focus custom task does is it allows you to specify the field that we need to jump to when we run into one of these events and the field is or the form is reset. And it just occurred to me, I might be able to think of a cool use for that, but we'll play around with that because we now have plenty of time here. So I think we can do a little experimentation. Generally don't like to do experimentation doing things live because of the chances of everything going horribly wrong, but we're gonna do it anyway. All right, so I had this run process. Let's kill that real quick. And let's pick our new custom task, which is going to be our set focus. So we go to form and we go to set focus and we'll hit add custom task. And now we have a couple of different events. We have input 20, which is our non-array field, I believe, and input 15, which is our array field. So the way that this is supposed to go, one would expect the numbers to be lower with the default names, but I didn't put the non-array fields in until afterwards. So input 20 should be the second of my non-array fields. So that is going to be the event. And I'm going to configure this to jump to input 15, which is inside my array, which is the first of my array fields. So we'll hit OK. And by the way, I'm probably going to need a second one. So we're going to have to add that too. So once again, we'll go to form and we'll go to set focus. We'll add that custom task. And obviously, if I click on input 15, I want that to just tab over to my next field. So I want that to tab to input 16. And so now I have 2 set focuses for my 2 event fields on my form. So I should be able to update and run this form now. Should be able to add my row. And now I can put some data there, hit tab. That takes me to input 20. So I'm going to fill that in, hit tab. Okay, my form reloaded, but it pointed me to input 15, which I can fill in and hit tab. My form is still going to reload, but it is going to set my focus to input 16 so that I, as an end user, can go tabby tab through my form. Now, this add row thing here, I don't know that I have an event for that. Do I? Is there an add row? There is an add row 18 event. So let's try something a little sneaky here. Let's throw in another. And now I'm just vibing, man. I'm just making stuff up as I go along, but we're going to throw in another set focus. And we're going to drop this set focus onto add row 18. And I'm not sure this is going to work because I'm not sure the order of operations that's going to fire. But what I want to do is when I click the add row button, I want to jump my cursor into input 15. So I don't know if it creates the field prior to doing the set focus, in which case this will work great, or if it does it after the set focus CT fires, in which case it'll work badly. Order of operations is important. Certain events on a form happen in a certain order. So when a form event kicks off, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens. There is checks for scripts, checks for custom tasks. Then there are events built into the form, like, form display, form load, form display, what have you. And there's a specific order to operation in which all of these things happen. So what I'm trying to do is if I add a row, I just want it to automatically set the focus on input 15. So let's open her up. Let's hit update and run. And let's hit add row. And it did it. Now it's going to be a problem because now every time I hit add row, it's going to go back to row 1 here, which is not great. Well, that was a change. Okay, so let me show you something. So this is just kind of like a little troubleshooting thing for how this would work. All right, so if I hit add row, it does take me to input 15. Unfortunately, because it's in an array, it will take me back up to the very first input 15 row in the array, which and I don't necessarily want it to do. So every time I hit add row, so we'll go here and we'll do that, and we'll hit add row, it always just going to take me up there, except let's do this. Let's change this value. And now let's click the add row button. What happened is it took me over here to this field. It did not, when I hit add row, jump me back up to this field. So this is an order of operations thing. The last thing that occurred in the order of operations that happened, and in this case, 2 separate custom tasks fired. So what happened was it dropped me over into this field and it ran that set focus, and it did not do the set focus that took me back up to that field there. So order of operations is important, and this stuff can, you have to play around with things to see what's going to happen whenever you're running some of these custom tasks. The validate form custom task is one that you should be using more than you do, because I've seen many of your applications and people tend not to use all of the validations that they should. So when we talk about validation, we have 2 basic ways of doing validation. Standard way is to add some sort of validation rules to your form. Now, forms automatically have validation rules built into them. For example, if I set a field as required, and then I try to submit the form without putting a value in that field, that is going to kick off a validation error. So simply by setting a field as required creates a validation rule for that field. Similarly, I can set up some other validation rules for other form fields where I check their values, and if their value either meets or does not meet whatever validation condition that I set, then the form will not validate and will not be submitted. In most cases, form validation occurs once when I click the submit button on the form. So if I have 10 validation errors, the form is not going to tell me about them. It's not going to show me any of them until I click the submit button. Then it's going to run through the validation process, and it's going to look at all of my form fields. And based on what it finds there, it's going to present a list of whatever the validation errors are. That's only going to happen once. And it's only going to happen when I try to submit the form. The validate form custom task enables me to call a validation whenever I want to call it. So let's go back to my form. Let's go back to my, I already have form controls that are event fields, so I can call that validation immediately. So we'll go to our custom task event mapping tab. I removed all of those set focus events, but I still have the events themselves. So we're going to go into form and we're going to pick validate form. We're going to add that custom task, and we're going to do it on the input 20, which is my non-array field. We're going to do it when that field event fires, and now we have to configure what validation we're going to use. Now, I don't have a validation rule. I should have created that first. So we'll go back and do that. In most cases, since I'm going to kick it off on an event field, I only want to validate the event control that is going to run the custom task. If I don't check this, it's going to show me all of the validation rules on the form. Now, I don't have any yet, so there's nothing to show me. So there's nothing to validate, but we're going to validate only the event control which runs this custom task. So I could have many different validation rules, but I only want to validate this event control. We're going to need a field into which to save our errors. So we'll go to input 19. This is optional, by the way. I don't need to choose a field to save the number of errors. And in this case, because I'm only validating only the event control, I'm only going to have one error, and I always know it's going to be that one error, so I don't really need to fill that out. And I can also specify a parent field like a section and validate only the controls within a section. So with this custom task, I can validate only the event control, or I can validate only events within a parent field, basically a section control, and it will just validate only the controls in that section. Or I can just validate the entire form from here. And I could skip the validation rules, and the only thing that it would validate would be the control rules. Basically, is this a required field or not? So I've got a lot of variation here. And the nice thing about this is it can happen whenever I want it to happen. So in this case, I've got a specific field. I want to fill it out, and I want to validate that field instantly. So I need a validation rule for that field. So I've got my custom task. I'm now going to need to create a validation rule. And so we'll just add a validation rule, and we'll click to create a condition. We'll do something simple. We'll say that input 20. So we go input 20. Let's see. Does not contain X. So the validation fails if the condition is met. So I have the choice to determine whether it's a fail if I meet the condition or I don't meet the condition. So we're going to keep if met. So if I have an X in input 20, that condition fails if that, no. You got to do this. This requires a little thinky pain sometimes. I want the validation to fail if this condition is not met. So if I don't have an X, no, is that, I'm trying to think of, so input 20 does not contain X. I probably shouldn't use does not contain. So input 20, there's no X in the field. If there's no X in the field, I want the validation to fail if the condition is not met. Boy, I really shouldn't be creating conditions that do double negatives. What I really should do is if it contains X. And that way, if it contains X, I want my validation to fail. This is much easier for me to figure out what'll happen. And then I need an error message. So there's my error message. And then we are validating input 20, I believe. So that's our validation. So fine, I got a validation rule. If it contains an X, it does not validate. So we'll update and run our form. And this field, nothing happens. We don't care. Now we go to this field and we'll just type in some data. And again, nothing happens. Great. So now we'll go to this field and we'll type in some more data. And now I've got a problem. There is an X in the text of that field. It contains an X, therefore it failed validation. And so validation occurs automatically, and because this is an event field, if I just simply delete the X and I exit that field, my validation error goes away. So validate form is a custom task that I can run anytime I want to run it. I can validate the entire form, a part of the form, or a single field on the form itself. There is a similar custom task, by the way, that is called validate form field. It operates a little bit differently, and it doesn't impose validation rules. Validate form looks at your validation rules, both those that are built into the form, like setting something as required, and those custom validation rules that you create. Validate form field is a little bit different and a little bit more specific. I'm not sure that I would call this a common custom task, but people often ask, what is the difference between the two? Validate form field does something very special. Validate form field enables you to take a form field, so we'll take input 19, and it allows you to write a regular expression that specifies usually a format that the field must meet. So for example, and I am not a regular expressions guru by any stretch of the imagination. Anytime I use regular expressions, I got to go and copy and paste it from somebody on Stack Exchange that knows what they're talking about. So I can't tell you what a regular expression, I can't come up with a regular expression off the top of my head, but regular expressions generally define a format for some sort of text. So email or phone number formats or some sort of social security number form, whatever the format happens to be. Usually this is used for some value that requires a special format. And regular expression enables you to take the value of a form field and see if that form field matches the specifications for that field that you have specified in your regular expression. And that's all it does. It's basically, I guess you'd have to call it a format validator. I know there's a couple of you that are regular expression gurus out there and you know exactly how this stuff works and you're great with it. I unfortunately am not, so I can't go through regular expressions with you, but that's what the validate form field does. It's really just a basically a format validator. But like any other custom task, you can call it off any form event. And again, this is generally a form custom task, and you'd only use it in the context of a form. All right, so let's talk about the alerts. There's two, both of which are very useful. So I'm just going to go back and reset all of this stuff back to status quo ante, and going to update here real quick. Then we're going to go back into my form. I'm going to go ahead and delete this bit of the form. So we'll just get rid of that, and we'll get rid of that. I think we'll keep everything else the way it is, but I am going to add a button here because that's just the easiest way of calling a custom task, because buttons are always event controls. So I'm just going to drop in a button, and I'm just going to call it click me. And if I wanted to do some other formatting, I would, but I don't. We'll be happy with a gray button. So now I've got button 16, and actually we'll just call it click me button. And we'll save and close our form. So now I've got a button. The show alert custom task allows me to, or enables me to provide additional information to my users. In fact, it may allow me to do much more than that, but we'll talk about that in a second. So let's go to my custom task event mapping, and we'll go to show alert. Now, the show alert custom task is one from BP Logix. We created it, and it's pretty simple. So when my click me button fires, I'm going to want to show an alert. It only has a couple of things that I can give it. I have a caption. I've got the message I want to send, and then the type of alert it is. I got none, info, success, warning, error. We'll pick info. And you can actually test the alert here. So there's what an info alert looks like. As you can see up here, my caption is caption. My alert text is the actual alert message. The alert icon, info. So there's my big I in a circle. And that's all it does. It gives me that alert message, and I can hit OK. Now, it is just an alert message. It's not a confirmation dialogue or anything like that. It's the simplest version of the alert. But there is a secondary version. And for this, I have to give a big shout out to Sean Campbell at the city of Fort Worth, who created the advanced show alert custom task. And we liked it so much that we immediately added it to the product. Now, we're not going to go into all of the details about how this custom task works, but we will talk about some of its major features. Now, at the very top of the custom task, I mean, it does all of the same things that the other custom task does. So if I just want to have a, generic alert message, pick the alert icon, warning. Okay, there we go. I have the basic alert, and there's no test button here for this one. So I'm just going to go okay, and we'll update and run the form, and we'll hit click me, and there is my alert. Again, doesn't do anything other than tell me something, that there's an alert message, and I can click the OK and get on with my life. It hasn't really affected me at all, but I can do a lot more stuff with this. First of all, there are some visual things that I can do. There's a footer that we can add with text for the footer. So We can just see that run. This is the footer. I can change the position on the screen where I want that alert box to show. I like center, so I'm going to keep center, but you have a lot of options. Can the alert grow in size? Yes, it can. Do we want it to grow horizontally based on the information that we have in the alert text or folder text? Do we want it to grow vertically based on that? So grow by row, basically horizontal, grow by row, vertical, grow by column is horizontal. And I can change the text of the button. So my confirm button, which is by default okay, I can change that. I'm not sure where those two H's came from or that A. And my confirm button color, I can put in red. I think I can also put in I don't remember off the top of my head. I can put in the hexadecimal color, but I think I can also just put in one of the known HTML colors. I think green is a named HTML color. I'm pretty sure. So we'll set this to green, but you could also set this to hexadecimal, I believe. And once I click that confirm button, if I have another button on the form, this alert box will click that other button. And that's pretty cool because what that implies and what we're allowed to do is if I can do something on confirm, then I should be able to cancel and not confirm. And indeed, I can, because I can put in cancel button text and cancel button colors, and that oregano is not a color. Oh, wait a second. I lost it. And let's go ahead and we'll OK our way through this and we'll update and run. Now I can click me. And yes, green and orange are both named HTML colors. As you can see, I added a footer here with some footer text. I've got my yes and my no button, so I can actually, if I had set it to push another button, I don't have one on the form, but if I would hit yes, it would actually perform whatever function was performed by the secondary button. And if I hit no, it would just skip over it and not perform the action. So this advanced show alert button, well, actually is pretty useful and really converts the alert from just merely a simple alert to a modal dialog box that gives me choices as a user and allows me to implement other functions. There's also the ability to throw input fields on the thing. This is really cool. I would go through more of it, but it's 11:38, so we're kind of running out of time. We need to move on. But this advanced show alert, that is a really cool and useful custom task. And I do note that it has been a custom task since we released it that a lot of people like and a lot of people use. There are two more that are very important, and I already have working examples of them, so I don't think we need to create them from this particular application. There is the convert to PDF and copy form data. The copy form data is right here. And what this copy form data does, and we'll go ahead and look at the original one. I have two forms and I've got a process timeline. And at some point, I want to swap my original form for a new form. But I want to copy some data from that original form to my new form. Now, I do have a couple of ways of doing this. And normally, the way that I would implement this would not be in this simple of an implementation. But what I want to do is have somebody fill out this first form, submit the form, and then in the process timeline itself, I want to create a new form, and I'm going to create it off of my original form. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of the new form, and I'm going to copy some data from the old form to the new form. Now, normally, the way that I would implement this, and we'll just close this right now, and we'll just sort of run it real quick. That's the new form, which I don't want to run. This is my original form. And neither of these two forms is super impressive. And they don't do a whole bunch, but I have this original form. And I am, whenever it compiles and displays to us, I'm going to fill it out, or at least partially fill it out. So here is my original form field. So this is the field that we're going to copy. And then I have the second field here. We're not going to copy that to another form, but we are going to copy this value to a second form. So I'm going to hit submit. And as you can see now, I am looking at a different form, and I still have my copied field ZZZZZ there, and I have this entirely new and exciting field that I can toss up there. And now if we go into our timeline and we go back and we look at our completed timelines, I have this one that I just completed, and we can open up the properties for this timeline instance. We can go to the timeline items, and I can see that I have two forms, the original form, which is right there, and then the new form, which is right there. And so there's my original form and my different form with the copying over. Now, a little caveat about copy form data. Usually, we don't use this inside the same process. Usually, with copy form data, we use it when we're calling a second process. There's nothing in there. Sorry. I was just checking to see whether it had that set up. Usually we call copy form data when there is a second process that has its own form. And so we're going to launch the run process CT. Now, whenever we launch run process, a couple of things are going to happen. It is going to copy the form from my parent process to the process that gets launched through the run process CT. So my original form would just get copied down into my second process. But that second process probably has its own form. So I can use the copy form data now that I've got the second process running. Inside my second process is where I'd run the copy form data custom task. And I would just say, okay, well, fine. Once I have kicked this process off, it should create a new copy of my new form for this process. And because I kicked it off as a sub-process, a copy of the original form from the parent process has also been attached to this process timeline instance. Well, cool. So since I have both of these forms now, I can, and remember, my form for this process is the new form. So great. All I have to do is just run this copy form data, set the original form as my container form, and then just say, okay, form to create. Little misleading because I may not be creating the new form. It may have already been created. If an instance of the new form already exists, it won't necessarily create a brand new instance. But then I can now do whatever form field mapping I need to do to get the data from one form to the other form. There is a simpler way to do this that doesn't require this sort of custom task to run that you may be interested in when you look at the form. And I know we've talked about this in the past. We don't talk about it enough, but it does exist inside each of your forms. you do have the ability for each form field to synchronize the field within process. So as long as my form fields have the exact same names on two different forms, if both of those forms are in the same process, then whatever field is marked as my synchronization field, my master field, its value will automatically be transferred over to another form who has a field of the same name inside the same process. If you are starting from scratch with the two different forms and you can ensure that all the form field names are the same, this is an easier way of doing that, not having to run the custom task at all. However, in most cases, you're calling a separate process. And that form field or that form has its own different fields with its own unique names. So synchronization wouldn't work in that context. Synchronization would only work if you designed your forms specifically for synchronization, which is to say, I've got a form field named X in my parent form, and I have to have a form field named X in all of the other forms that are going to share a process with this original form. If I can't do that, or I have forms that have separate field names, then field synchronization won't work. So if I design for field synchronization, I don't have to use the copy form data at all usually. But in most cases, if I'm calling secondary processes, the field names will probably be unique. And in that case, I would need to call the copy form data custom task just to ensure that I called it in the process timeline. So I'd need to call the copy form data in that case just to ensure that the two fields were synchronous. Now, in this case, they're both called input one because I didn't really make any changes to them. Basically, I just copied the form, honestly. So all of my form field names are the same. So in this particular instance, I could certainly just use field synchronization. But let's say it was called input one in my destination form, but it was called input two in my source form. If so, synchronization won't work, and I will have to use the copy form data custom task to get the data from one form instance to another form instance. And finally, the most common thing is convert to PDF. It's pretty straightforward in how it works, and I have an entire webinar where I cover form conversions and whatnot. So I don't think since I have an entire webinar on form conversions, I don't think we need to get into it all that much. But the transform to PDF is very important. And one of the reasons why it is important is not simply to take a document or a form or a collection of forms and document attachments and export them into one big PDF file, which is one of the most common uses for the convert to PDF custom task. And that is transform form to PDF. That is not convert. I need to go, sorry, to PDF conversion. I was way in the wrong custom task. There we go. This one. This can be a super simple custom task to configure. So in this case, I just want to take the current form and convert it to PDF, and ta-da, I've configured it. It can get a little more advanced than that. So for example, if I did not just want to do the current form, but I also had process references, I had documents and what have you, I would need to do process references, item types, all. And then on my PDF, what's going to happen by default is it's just going to convert them, all of my documents and my form, to PDF files, but it's going to convert each one of them separately. So if I have 5 document attachments and a form, it's going to make 6 new document attachments because it's got to convert 5 documents to PDF and the form to PDF. So now instead of a form with 5 attachments, I have a form with 11 attachments. I can make that a lot simpler, by outputting all items to a single PDF. I can determine in what order I would like those PDFs to be ordered. And generally, by default, we order the form first and any document attachments come after the form. Although I can change that by turning off group forms together. And I can take all of my document attachments and my form, and I can convert them all to a single PDF, which, by the way, I will have to name. So we'll have to put a name in this field. And it will save all of those attachments and the form into a single PDF file, and we'll just attach one additional PDF. By the way, that makes this great to use for archiving. So if you've had Process Director for a long time, and you have all of these old form instances and all these old documents, and you just want to get rid of them all, well, you can certainly do that. First of all, assume we have a copy of the database backed up with all that old stuff in it. It's a big database. We don't want to use it anymore. We want to get rid of all of that old information that's beyond 5 years or 7 years or whatever our document retention policy is. You can actually run a process that will go through and find all of those old instances of all of these old processes and just run through them. And if they're beyond a certain age, and by the way, you can do this via a kicking off a process with a custom, with a knowledge view, where you just pull back all of these old documents, call this knowledge view to run a process on each row in the knowledge view. And you can just take and convert the form and any document attachments from those old processes, convert them to PDF, and actually you can export those PDFs using item actions to an external file system. And you can just take all of those old documents, convert them all to PDF, save the PDF in a file system, which will allow your IT people to go back in and just delete all of that old stuff from your database, because you have copies of the form and all of the document attachments now in PDF format in your file system. That'll save you some database space. So that convert to PDF custom task is a pretty important one. So there's a couple of questions here that we got to answer before we go. We are actively running into issues with this particular task, copy form data. Okay, great. I don't understand from here what your issue might be. This is something that you should be addressing via tech support. I'm not really prepared to answer that live in a webinar, especially for a system that I'm not going to be able to look at during the webinar. So please, for that question, support that as a technical support ticket, and we'll have someone look at that. Can I use the convert to PDF to also capture the routing slip of the original form instance? Yes. If you have a routing slip on the form, it should convert to PDF and be displayed in the PDF file as long as it's visible on the form itself. It should be visible when the convert to PDF custom task runs, so that the image of your routing slip will also be part of the PDF. So in the case of the archiving, if you want to go back to something that was 5 years ago and take a look at the routing slip, it should show up on that PDF. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for joining me. It was a pleasure bringing the training webinar to you. I'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, have a great week. So long.